Welcome to this demo video on how to use the Symantec Control Compliance Suite 12.5 REST APIs, which follows our introductory video on REST APIs. If you haven't seen the introduction yet, you can find the link in the description of this video. The following are the prerequisites to use these REST APIs. You must install or upgrade to Symantec Control Compliance Suite 12.5. On the Control Compliance Suite console, in the Integration Services section of the Application Server Settings, the HTTPS Enabled box must be selected. You must have the required roles and permissions to execute the REST APIs. These authorization requirements are documented in the Symantec Control Compliance Suite REST API Guide. So let's walk through an end-to-end use case of configuration assessment of computers using REST APIs. To execute REST APIs, you can use any tool that supports REST development and testing. For this demo, I will use Postman. So, as you can see, I've already installed the Postman client on my computer. Let's start it. Here we go. In this Create New section on Postman, click Collection to create a folder to save your API requests, and then start creating requests to execute REST APIs. To start with, I must generate an authentication token, which I must use in the subsequent API calls. To generate the token, I have to create a POST request by using my Windows credentials. Upon successful completion of the request, I'll receive an access token and a refresh token. Remember, when the application server service is running, my access token is valid by default for 60 minutes. If my access token expires, I'll use the refresh token to create another POST request to generate a fresh pair of tokens. Of course, I can change these default validity settings. How do I do that? It's explained in the Control Compliance Suite REST API Guide. If both the tokens expire, I will create a POST request by using my Windows credentials again. Let's get started. I'll type the request name and the description over here. Here you can create a new folder to save requests or select one from the list. I will select the one which I've already created for this demo. My request is saved. So this is the POST request. Here's the request URL. I will select the authorization type, Inherit Auth from Parent. Select Content Type, Application/JSON. And here's the request body. Alright, I'll send the request now. Awesome! I've got the status code 200 OK, which means my request has completed successfully. And as you can see on the screen, I've got the access token and the refresh token. I'll use this access token in all the subsequent API calls. Now, if I want to run an assessment scan on computers in my environment, I'll have to add or import them as assets in Control Compliance Suite. For that, I'll use the Create Asset API. It's a POST request. Now please note, the authorization type must be bearer token for all the subsequent APIs. When we generated the tokens, the type was Inherit Auth from Parent. This is the access token that I generated earlier. The same token will be used in all APIs that follow. Okay, so here the content type will be Application/JSON. And this is the request body. I've picked up this JSON body from the API guide and filled in the required values. Alright, let me click Send and wait for the response. Bingo! I've got the 201 created status, which denotes the successful completion of my request. And here are the details of the assets that are created. Now, because I want to run a compliance scan on a Windows asset, I'll use the Search Standards API to get a list of available technical standards for Windows Platform. It's a GET request. See the request URL. I've used the attribute display name contains Windows. Authorization type is bearer token, and here is the access token that we generated earlier. I will skip this part in the following APIs in the interest of time. Let me submit the request. Great! Upon successful completion of my request, I've got a list of standards that contain the word Windows in their display name. I'll now pick up a standard for Windows Server 2012 R2 computers. I'll note down the standard ID as I need to mention it in the collection evaluation job that I'm going to run. Now, among the assets that I created earlier, I'll search for a Windows Server 2012 R2 asset. I'll use the Search Assets API for that. So it has to be a GET request. In the request URL, I'll use the OS version type attribute for Windows Platform. Hit Send. I've got the list of Windows 2012 R2 assets. Among these assets, I will look for an asset by display name. Got it. Here is the asset on which I will run the scan. I'll note down the asset ID as I need to mention it in the collection evaluation job that I'm going to run. It's time to create a collection evaluation job. I will use the standard ID and the asset ID that I have copied earlier. I've created a post request. Here's the request URL, and here's the request body. As you can see, this is the ID of the Windows 2012 R2 asset that I noted earlier. And this is the ID of the Windows 2012 R2 standard. Let me click Send. Upon the successful completion of this request, I get the job ID. I need this ID to run the job. It's time to run the collection evaluation job, and for that I will use the Job Operation API. I've created a post request. Here's the request URL. This is the job ID that I copied in the Create Job API. Content type is application JSON. I'm using the execute operation to run the job. Here I click Send. And my job is started. You can see right now the job status is 2, which means the job is running. Now, before I generate evaluation results, I will confirm whether the collection evaluation job that I ran has completed. I will use the Get Latest Job Runs API for that. So, it's a GET request. Here's the URL. You can see I've added the job ID from the collection evaluation job that I ran earlier. Click Send, and here's the response. You can see the job status is 4, which means the job run is complete. It's time to collect results. Let's use the Get Raw Results in JSON Format API. It's a post request. Here is the URL. In the request body, I specify the asset ID and the standard ID that I used in the collection evaluation job and for which I want to generate the results. I just submit the request, and that's it. I've got the evaluation results in JSON format. I can use these results as a reference and also in the automated remediation workflow. This is how you can assess the compliance posture of your IT assets by using REST APIs. For more information about the Symantec Control Compliance Suite REST APIs, refer to the REST API Guide. To execute APIs, refer to the sample Python scripts available on GitHub. For any queries, contact Symantec Enterprise Technical Support. Thanks for watching this video.